I make custom stuffed animals, and I also make custom patterns for those stuffed animals, and I have been asked what programs I use and what my process is. I figured I would make it a video tutorial since this is the easiest way to do it. So this method is completely free with one caveat, and that caveat is if you want to sell the stuffed animal. The programs you're going to need are Blender or any 3D software. As long as it works in polys, you should be fine. I don't know if sculpting softwares like on your mobile device will work. I've never tried. As long as you can see what your poly count is, then you're probably fine. You're also going to need Plushify, which is free with the one caveat. And the last program you're going to need is a drawing software. You don't even necessarily need to have a drawing software, but it is extremely helpful for things like the eyes or the nose or the mouth or the little ears up here. Anything that you're going to have to stamp on after that you can't just sew with a pattern piece. The one caveat that makes this not free is if you want to sell the plushie. And the reason for that is Plushify sells a license to help keep their lights on. And this license is, I think, $35 a month. Now, do I think that the person who works on Plushify is going to hunt you down like a bloodhound if you sell your stuffed animal without the license? No, but it is very helpful to them, and it would be kind of a rude thing to sell it without the license when they really want you to have that license if you're going to sell your work. But if you're making a plushie for yourself or as a gift, you're totally fine. This method is completely free. A couple things. You're going to need a 3D model for this. That's how Plushify works. Next, you do not need your model to be textured like mine is. I'm just going to texture it, and I would recommend texturing it because this way you have the pieces like the eyes or the nose or the mouth as flat. So it should be easier later to stamp it on to the plushie in Plushify. This also helps me personally figure out where I want these pieces to be. So I'm not in Plushify constantly trying to figure out where I might want them. I would also recommend in Blender or whatever software you're using, having references of the plush you want to make. Here's mine. Wow. Great. Just so that you know what you want your plush to look like. This also helps make it easier to draw your texture on. This is super helpful. Why did I say that you're going to need to know what your poly count is? That is because Plushify works best with models that are on the lower side of polys. They recommend 10,000 polys max. Anything above that, apparently your result's going to be worse. Having said that, there is a Plushify tutorial that they have on their website, and I will link that in the description. So if you prefer reading something rather than watching something, you can do that. But if you prefer watching and following along, then the tutorial is going to be for you. So, it doesn't say how many tries I have over here. Why is that? Well, because apparently I don't have that turned on. Don't even worry, you're probably going to have all of the things you need over here. If you don't, go over to this button over here and select statistics here. The number you're going to want to look at is triangles. I have 6,100 and some, which is well within the 10,000 range. Now, the reason I say check triangles instead of squares is because Plushify will automatically cut your squares into triangles. So checking the triangles instead kind of just helps you mitigate the issue before it even happens. But you shouldn't have an issue, like I said, your model should probably be low poly. Now, if your program does not have UV mapping, you cannot mark your seams in that program. Don't worry though, you can mark them in Plushify itself. If you are using Blender or another software that supports UV mapping, then I'm going to show you real quick how you can do that so that you don't have to mark your seams in Plushify, because I personally prefer the freedom that 3D programs provide, but you might prefer Plushify instead. I'll go over both methods. So UV unwrap, go up here to UV. Wow, I already did mine, and I'm not going to do it again, but I will show you how to do it. Press the 2 key on your keyboard. This selects the edges and it's just easier, you're going to go where you want your, ignore the bad geometry, okay? You don't need your geometry to be good. Go to where you want your seam to be, and you're just going to select just like you would expect on a plush. This is where, like, if you have never made a plush before, look up references and you can try to figure out where you want your seams to be. Plushify will help you. When we're done here, I'll show you. Once you have your seam selected, click U, mark seam. The seam's already marked, so I'm not going to click it, but it's just going to add this red line here that means that it has marked the seam. In order to map all of your UVs, like this, you're going to click U, unwrap, angle unwrap. I don't know if these work. This works the best for me. It's the simplest. Now, if you do want to give your model a texture, you'll probably want to arrange. Again, this is very badly done, but I don't care. So you're gonna have to arrange where you want your textures to be. The main thing you need to know is the more detailed you want your texture to be, the bigger you want to make the piece, which is why the head piece is the biggest piece, and the things like the fur can be very small because I'm not adding a texture to them. Cool? Cool. Once you have your 3D model, and maybe you UV unwrapped it and maybe you didn't, it doesn't matter. That's completely optional. It's just a little helpful for me personally, in my opinion, allegedly. You're going to need to export it. Now, the only thing you need to know about exporting is that it has to be an OBJ file. Plushify recognizes OBJ files, and to my knowledge, nothing else. To export it as an OBJ file, go up to File, Export, and it will say OBJ there. Also, don't forget to save your texture, which you can do by going to Texturing, Image, Save. Saving your textures is important anyway, and you should probably get in the habit of doing it so that if Blender crashes, you don't lose all of your stuff. So, real quick, I'm going to show you how to single out your textures so that it's easier to put into Plushify later. Now, if you want to save your texture in a format that a drawing program will recognize, go up to Image, and just under Save, you can click Save As, and you can save it as a PNG or a JPEG or whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. We're just trying to key out the details that you want. I have just imported my texture into my drawing software. I am using Krita because it's free. This should work in any drawing software. You can do this in MS Paint if you want. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can. The easiest way to single out your texture is to press the F key to select your fill tool, press E, and you can see now the eraser is selected, which means I can just click, and a lot of stuff goes away. But you can fix that. Over here at Threshold and Spread, as you can see, I've decreased threshold, and now you can see everything is singling out a lot easier. Now, this isn't perfect. You're going to have to do a lot of work yourself, but hey, that's how the cookie crumbles. Okay, this isn't gonna be this isn't gonna be an instantaneous thing. I'm also going to come in here and work on getting rid of these extra textures here. Another way that you can do this is with the fill tool. So if I select all of this here, select fill, and then actually come down here to spread, when I erase it, see, it'll spread the eraser in. And you can just fix this by staying on spread and refill tooling. So it should be the same size. Yep. Now everything is singled out. So select what you want to duplicate, and in the newer versions of Krita, go down here, and this looks like every copy tool ever. You don't even have to do that. You can actually right click and instead click cut selection to new layer, and that will get rid of the selection on the previous layer. And I find this to be more useful than copying it, because now I know what I have and haven't put on a new layer. Now I'm just going to reuse this paw twice. So I'm just going to quickly look at it and see which one is better. There we go. It's easier on the eyes, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to press the C key and click. This is going to crop things for you. We're going to crop it down, and Plushify just had an update that redoes the handles for putting in different patterns. So I would have a month ago told you to leave some extra room because the handles used to be really freaking big, but they're not really freaking big anymore, so you can kind of crop it to be as minimal as you want. Then press enter when you're done. I'm going to turn off my back layer, and now I can export this as a PNG, and I'm going to go to my folder. When you're done, just Control Z, and ta-da! Plushify does have a rotation tool. So I'm not super worried about getting the rotations right and everything. Also, at least in my experience, sometimes when you import images, it transforms them 90 degrees in a certain direction. Now, the reason that I recommend making a texture, and the reason I said that it will, and the reason I said it's important that it will give you a flattened version of whatever texture you decide to paint on, is because your texture will warp to fit your model. So it's kind of good to have. My model had a mirror modifier, so I didn't have to do the work initially. Duplicate this layer and mirror it. And bam, now I have a nose. Fantastic. There is a texture painter in Plushify. I believe I said that before, but I like the control that this gives me. I also like having all of the texture files separately and in my computer. Now, to import your plush into Plushify, you don't need an account to do this. I would recommend getting an account because then your patterns will save between devices, but you don't need one. If you've never uploaded a plush pattern before to this website, then the create new pattern button is probably going to be somewhere else. It should be very big and obvious though. So we're going to create new pattern. We're going to import our file, and uh-oh, we don't only have tris and quads. If this happens to you, I'm really quickly going to show you how to quickly find where your incorrect geometry is. So here's my model. We're in Blender. We are in edit mode, and I don't feel like looking through my entire model to find where these are. So the easiest way that I have found, and there might be an even easier way you can share in the comments, the easiest way that I have found to find irregular geometry is to come up here, click select, select all by trait, faces and sides. When you click faces and sides, get back here. What you want to do is you want to come down to this little menu. It will probably start you at like 4. If you want to select irregular geometry, all you have to do is increase this to 5. And as you can see, oh, there it is. You can also just press, if you have a numpad, the period key on your numpad, and it will take you right to it. In order to fix this, I'm just going to click K and add some edges. There we go. Now I'm going to re-export it, drop in your file, and now Plushify is going to give you some instructions. All you have to do is follow it. And now our plush is in Plushify, and we can use the UVs we set up earlier to make the pattern making process a lot faster. Again, if you didn't do the step, just discard the UVs, and I will quickly show you how you can edit your seams within Plushify itself. Now, Plushify just had an update, so I'm going to show you the new feature that they added, which I think will benefit a lot of you. If you did the UV maps from earlier, when you go to import your plush, do all the same steps as before. If you did your UV maps, click Use UV Maps, and now you can actually upload a texture. So if you did save your texture from earlier, you can upload it and it will automatically add the texture to your model. Now, I'm not going to do this, and I'm going to show you why I'm not going to do this in a second. When you add your texture to the model like this, it will add a lot of extra pieces. For example, with this ear, I don't want the ears like this. I had an inner ear here just fine. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of work to redo it. Also, if you redo the seam like I want it, with it not being completely 100% even all the time, and you go back to your patterns, as you can see, it just cuts off halfway on the face. And that's, I don't want to deal with that, okay? I don't want to deal with that. So if you want to do this as like a starting point, then absolutely go for it. I'm actually going to keep this so that I know what size the eyes need to be and the nose and everything. Otherwise, I don't know, if your plush is half and half completely, then this is probably a great thing for you. But if you have a piece where you want to get rid of the middle, then tough luck, you're going to have to do what I'm doing. So I highly recommend keeping symmetry on if your plush is symmetrical, because otherwise you're just doubling your work, and who wants to do that? So in order to edit the pattern any way you want to, you just find the vertice that you want to start your seam at, or in my case, delete a part of the seam. You click, and as you can see, if you are adding a seam, it will turn green. If you're deleting a seam, it will turn red. So I'm going to delete this seam, and I'm going to calculate the pattern, and you can see it's really cool. You can see where all the patterns are, where all the pattern pieces are. So if you want to visualize your plushie, that's a cool way to do it. You can edit. I like to keep calculate automatically on, which will basically mean you don't have to click this button anymore. You cannot do this if you have show pattern quality selected, and I would highly recommend turning on show pattern quality. Because as you can see, there are some parts of my plush that are good quality, but there are some parts like these legs that I need to fix a little bit. So once you have your pattern all done and how you want it, we're going to go ahead and go over to the seams. This is where you're going to name your seams, where you're going to decide what direction you want your fur to go, and a couple other small things. So I'm going to really quickly show you a really easy trick. Let's go ahead and come up here and name this face. As you can see, if I drag here, it'll show where the fur direction is going to go, so that when you put the pattern down on your fabric, you actually know what direction to put it down. But a quick, easy trick is if you just click, it'll go straight up. Now this doesn't work with this one, but it usually works because sometimes the pattern is upside down, which makes it super easy. So if your pattern is upside down and you just want the direction to go straight up, that's a really easy way to do it. As you can see, I have parts here that are just one edge long, like they aren't complicated, they're just flat. What I'm going to do is mark piece as flat so that when you're cutting your pieces, it will instead say cut out 4 of this piece instead of cut out 2 of this piece. I'm also really quickly going to caution you if you have a piece with a lot of pieces that connect to it. The way Plushify does that is it will, when you print out the pattern, it will show where the piece connects and it will write the name down. And if you have a lot of different pieces and a lot of pieces that connect to each other, I recommend using some shorthand to mark, and I'm going to show you that real quick. As you can see, this Jolteon has an ungodly amount of pieces. So what I started doing is instead of putting left or right, I put L or R. I also number different pieces. So as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is the 4th. When I actually printed this out and had to cut it out and remark where the pieces go, I ended up just putting T instead of top and B instead of bottom. And this is because it labels which piece connects to what. And with smaller pieces like this, your text can get cut off or it can become unreadable, like tiny unreadable. So if you use shorthand, it will help you when you're actually putting the plush together if you need it. If you don't need to use shorthand, then don't, because you'll just confuse yourself. As you can see, this is a really good example of just clicking to make your life easier. This piece is upside down, and all I have to do is click, and now the fur pattern is just going straight up over here, but straight down over here. Fantastic. If you're having trouble with fur direction, then I recommend looking up references like cat fur direction, dog fur direction, and different models will come up with really helpful arrows and stuff, and that should help you. Here's another good example of just clicking so that your fur direction goes straight up and perfectly align with your pattern piece. What this button does here is you can basically make it so that if you turn it off, this particular pattern will not appear when you print the pattern out. This is a pro feature. You can also look up different stuffed animals and copy where their fur directions go if you're still having a little bit of trouble. References are your best friend. Don't forget to use them. Now you could technically make it so that the fur direction went in the direction of the majority of the fur, but I just personally prefer to do it this way because if the fur direction went this way and this one goes this way, it would just bother me too much personally, but that's all up to you. You can come over here to fabrics, and this is where you're going to pick your colors. And there are a couple other settings that I'm not personally keen on messing with, but I will show you just so that you know what they are and how to mess with them. So if we click our primary color, as you can see, these are pro features. I can't show you this because I don't have pro. You'll see the name, the color. You can use hex codes. So if you did make a reference for your plushie earlier, this is where that comes in handy also, because you can directly color pick the color and put it in here. And down here with length, all you have to do is adjust this, and as you can see, the fur length got a lot longer. So for example, I use Cuddle Minky, so I would probably put the fur length about here. And now I can get a little bit of a better idea of what the plush might look like. This is only really useful if you're using furs, because then you can see how your form would change. I also did get Plushify Pro in between when I'm recording now and when I was recording before. So really quickly, I'm going to show you what all of these do. And I'm going to use Flareon as an example here because Flareon is very fluffy. So now I can increase the length as far as I'd like. Basically, density means the lower this is, the less individual fur strands you're going to have. What structure does is it kind of simplifies it or clumps it all together. I imagine this would be kind of useful if you're not using a furry fabric. Like if I was using a woolly fabric, I would turn it all the way up to see what that would look like. And all the bend does is determines how close these strands of fur actually come to the body. So like I would want the bend up here so that it covers these seams pretty nicely. That's all those do. In terms of other Plushify Pro features, I can now hide anything from the model as I choose. I forgot to talk about this earlier. Okay, so I'm gonna do it real quick right now. What this button allows you to do is you can click it. Actually, I'm not gonna do this here. I'm gonna do this on this one because I don't plan on using this one. If you have a piece selected and you click this button up here, you can mark the direction of your fabric on the piece itself. So you don't have, if you don't like this menu over here, you can do that. Okay, back to your regularly scheduled tutorial. I have the hex code copied and I'm just going to paste it in here. What this button does is it allows you to color pick directly from somewhere on your screen. So if you're smart and you open your reference on a separate tab, then you can do that. Now that we have that one picked out, we can go ahead and go through and do the rest of these. As you can see, you can edit all of these factors individually. So I have my second color in here, and I'm going to show you how to actually apply your colors. All I have to do is click this paint roller here and select the piece that you want your color to be placed on, and it places it on. It's super intuitive, very easy. Now that we have everything color-wise, fur direction-wise, pattern-wise all done, we're going to go over to detail. This is where we're going to add the eyes and the nose and the mouth and the paws and stuff. If you segmented your pieces, like I showed you earlier, let's do the paws first. Then you'll have a perfectly cut out little piece. All you have to do is click this button and click the piece that you want your stamp to be on. Remember when I said that it didn't matter if I put it in upside down or not? Well, this is why. Now I'm really quickly going to open the model in Blender, and this is so that I can actually get a good look at what I want everything to look like. Okay, now I have it open in Blender and I can just go back and forth. Now I personally like to use these little handles here to figure out if my piece is centered and angled correctly. You will have to play with this quite a bit to get it to look how you want. Sometimes things will also just kind of change when you're seeing the pattern like this. For example, I'm putting the paws in the center of the paw instead of up here. Now I can reuse paws for here. Once you have a piece that's the size you want it, and since these paws are going to be basically the same size, it actually says what the height and width of it is. 1.11 inches. And so now I can put that in here, and now they'll be the same size. Paws are done. Let us do the ears real quick. You can also double click and it will flip your piece. You can also do that here, I believe, yes. And just like any other program, you can use Control Z and undo what you just did. There we go, that's good enough for now. I might come back and change that later. You'll notice that the markings on the ears are on the backside too. I don't know if there's a way you can do that. I mean, while you're making the model, if you angle the ears forward, then you'll get two different pieces for sure. But I'm not really concerned with that. I'm just going to remember to only add the inner ear to two of them and then let the other two be the back. The hardest part is the face, always, basically. What I generally try to do is I try to get it as centered as I can in this view, and I like to do the nose first. And the reason I like to do the nose first is because I can kind of measure everything in relation to the nose, especially the mouth. The mouth can be very tricky if you do it first. It can also be kind of tricky to figure out what rotation is flat, and I really don't have good advice for this other than you're just going to have to eyeball it. I wish that it had a rotation thing here too. I wish it wasn't just height and width. What you can do though is you can come over to your pattern pieces. Now, it doesn't count this as an image. If your web browser does, then that's absolutely fantastic. I take the cut tool that comes with basically every computer, and I like to take a close-up picture of exactly where that piece I'm trying to censor is. And I can look at here, let me show you. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. Now y'all can basically see what I see. So if we look here, it isn't exactly center and it's also not exactly even. This is how I figure out if my piece is exactly where I want it or not. Now this can be a little bit misleading because the way your pattern looks and the way you actually have to do the darts and the way the darts will make it look are very different. But it might help you. And I'm making a tutorial, so my job is to help you. And I do the snip tool method with the mouth and nose too. The mouth is centered pretty okay, but it doesn't really look quite even. And like I said earlier, some things about your plushie may change while you're working. Like my mouth was way bigger on the other plushie in Blender. I'm going to keep it small for now because I like the way it looks, but once I get the eyes in, that could definitely change. Using landmarks for your stuff can also be extremely helpful. For example, if I go to Blender and I take note of where about on the eye the end of the mouth reaches, then I can figure out about how big it needs to be in relation. I can also use the nose. So like if I take the top of the nose goes a bit over the bottom of the eye, and the end of the mouth here goes about middle of the eye. I need to rotate it. Then it's a lot easier to figure out where your thing is supposed to go. I highly recommend using landmarks. You'll thank yourself. Now I'm doing the other eye, and another really easy, well, I don't want to say easy. Another helpful tip is you can actually use the handles when you're putting in your details to figure out where a part is supposed to be. For example, these handles up here, since I've made sure that the mouth is centered, I can use this piece to figure out that I already have this eye where I want it. So this eye needs to be up a little bit more. Too much. Much better. And you're probably going to still just have to go over here and see if the eyes are symmetrical. I officially have my pattern pieces in place. Everything is where I want it. So now we're going to go down to size. Now you can actually change from inches and centimeters up here. I'm a disgusting American, so I'm using inches. Generally, plushes are between 7 and 12 inches. There's a good bit of leeway taller, but the smallest plush that I've seen that's like actually a plush and not like a cute little keychain thing is like 5. So I want this cutie patootie to be a little bit bigger than this. Plushify also has an AR mode. I'm not going to show that off because I don't know how to record on my phone and get it on here to look nice. But the AR mode is super helpful because you can actually see it in real space. As you can see, you can see exactly how much of each fabric is being used, and you can check out where you maybe want to put each pattern in. This is also very helpful for if your plush is asymmetrical, figuring out if your pieces line up well. I will say that. Now, this little settings button, you can change the bleed and seam allowance. Why are you small? Why are you cut off? Whatever. Now, fabric width, this is going to depend heavily on where you're getting your fabric from. I use How Fabrics, so I just shot them an email and I was like, how wide is your minky? And they sent back that it's usually around 59 inches, so that's where mine's at. Now, in terms of bleed, I have a 1/4 inch here. Now, the fabric down here will take into account seam allowance, so like if I put it up to 1 inch, I'm going to need more fabric. Now, real quick, if you did want to get into the AR mode, it's this button up here, and if you have a gaming headset, fantastic. If you don't, your phone is going to be able to scan this QR code. And again, I'm not going to record it, but I will say that it is fairly high quality, actually, which surprised me. Now I've decided that the size of my plush is perfectly fine with me. Print section. Now, unless you went to a production class or you know a lot about paper, you're not going to know what any of this means. A4 is your standard paper size. Okay, you're going to have this. This is office paper. Anything above here, you're going to want to do your own research and figure out if you have this around your house and if your printer can print it. I know mine cannot. My printer, unless I like top load it, but I would need someone's help for that, so I'm not going to worry about it. I, generally speaking, if it's like a huge plush, like the big Jolteon plush and Flareon plushes we were looking at earlier, I'll generally get up to this level, and this is where you're going to not be able to print that at home. You're going to need to contact your local printing people. You can just go to Google and type in print shops near me, and it'll give you all the stuff. Their prices can range wildly. You also don't really need this printed in color, just to save you some money. You don't need to print it in color. With the new update, you can actually pick between swatches and full color, and it will give you the swatches and stuff. It's very helpful. If you select full color, this is what your print's going to look like. You might not have been able to see the swatches earlier, so I'm going to really quickly show you. If you look at the tail, you can see the little color swatch right here, and if I change it to name only, it will actually give the name of the color in my colors tab instead. So this might be helpful to some people. I'm just going to keep it as its name. What I'll also do right before I actually order what fabrics I want is I will go to my original reference or even the UV map and compare my swatches that I have to the color on the UV map. And it is a screen, so it's going to be a little bit different, but directly comparing them instead of just scrolling through whatever store you're using and looking at one and saying, oh, that looks like the color I need. If you do that, you might not really actually get the color that you need. Ordering swatches of individual colors is perfectly fine if you're planning on making stuffed animals or, I don't know, clothes. I don't know. Do they have swatches for different fabrics for clothes? Whatever. If you're planning on doing this for a long time, then I cannot recommend more just ordering the full swatch sheet, because over time the amount of money you're spending on individual swatches is going to outweigh how much you would have spent on the swatch sheet. If this is your first time printing anything on Plushify, I'm so serious, calibrate your printer with Plushify. If your calculations are wrong, Plushify will print, and I'm not blaming Plushify for this, okay, whatever. Plushify will print your pattern pieces out wrong at the wrong size, or like, for example, this could be off the paper a little bit. And since Plushify wasn't planning for it to be off the paper a little bit, you're not going to have the rest of that piece. Plushify does a really good job of walking you through it. I'm also like 99% sure there is a way to export your pieces up here for embroidery instead of applique. I don't have an embroidery machine. I have never embroidered in my life. I don't know how that works. So I'm sure Plushify has a way to do that on their website. I can't help you with that, sadly. I'm sorry. Now, if you want to share your plushie with other people, you're going to need Pro. This is one of the reasons I got Pro in the first place. It's very intuitive. If you want to send it to a specific email, you can. If you want to set specific permissions, you also can. You might be worried about, like, if I share it and I give the person full access, are they going to be able to edit the pattern, and is that going to ruin the pattern on my computer? No. How sharing patterns work is you're basically sharing a duplicate copy of your pattern to a different person. So when they open the pattern, they're going to see this exact screen, and they're going to be able to edit the seams and what kind of fabric they're using and stuff like that. But any edits that they make will not appear on your end. Hi, so the model and plush pattern that you saw me make in this video was a rough draft, and I figured I would come in after I have completed my pattern to the point where I'm like happy enough to say that this is what I'm going to make. I figured I would show you kind of what that looks like. So I redid the model some because, as I said, I wasn't happy with the head and the way the head looked, but the tail also was a little too thick, so I thinned it out a little bit to make it so that it would keep its volume, and especially so that the fur tufts over here would keep their shape. Like the shell here was used instead of the inner ear, I used the shell to place the inner ear where I wanted it. As for the face, I duplicated everything and screenshotted everything and used straight lines to make sure everything was lined up, and it's finally where I'm happy with it. I also made it smaller because I really didn't feel like dealing with this clipping onto another page, and I also want to make sure that I don't have to order more of this fabric here. I will be making this plush on my channel after I'm done with the Jolteon. This was done as a base so I can take commissions, and I want to make it in real life to make sure that I'm happy with it. You should have everything you need now to make your own stuffed animal patterns. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any more questions or tips, then please put them in the comments. Or if you have like anything else to add, put that in the comments too, because as someone who follows tutorials, those kinds of things are very helpful and appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. I hope your plush turns out amazing.